Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar on the topic of personal property protection. I'm Candace Critchlow, Port Coquitlam Community Police Services Manager, working as part of the Coquitlam RCMP Community Policing team. We're very excited to bring you today's presentation as part of our 2021 Community Safety Webinar Series. The hope of this webinar is that with the summer coming and property crime typically increasing, that we can then discuss how to protect your personal property from homes, mail, and vehicles. So joining us today, we have quite a few community partners. We have Larry Wong from Canada Post and Kathleen Nadalin from our ICBC Road Safety team. And we also have Constable Binder from the Coquitlam RCMP Property Crime Unit. So in order to take us away and start our presentation, I am actually going to cover off one of our topics, which is more about home security and personal safety. So for home security and personal property protection, one of the main things that we need to do is we actually need to think about the exterior of your home, your apartment building or your garage. And what would make it easy for someone to access that space? And how is this space intended to be used in order to keep using your space normally? So to help us think this way, we use the principles of CPTED. So this is crime prevention through environmental design. Although this is best implemented during like our building phases when you're first starting out, we can explore some simple and fairly like cost-effective ways that proper design and effective use of the built environment can lead to the reduction of the fear of crime and even incidents of crime, and really ultimately improve the quality of life of where you're living. These principles really, they work together, they're overlapping concepts, and they apply to each space differently. So you'll see what I mean as we go. The main thing to talk about for natural access control as one of the first generation CPTED components is basically that it's more than barbed wire and walls. So it's about strategic placement of borders and creating guides for people to go through a space. So it's creating these real or psychological barriers that creates movement and less opportunity for offending, loitering, or wandering. Natural surveillance is all about seeing and being seen. So we want to maximize visibility through strategic placement. And again, a person is less likely to commit a crime or do something that wasn't intended of the space if they think that somebody will see them do it. Territoriality is taking ownership of the use of the space as it was intended. So rather than sustaining unwelcome behavior, if you don't care, why should someone else? So developing that sense of proprietorship where public areas are clearly distinguished from private ones. So potential trespassers then would perceive this control and thereby be discouraged. Maintenance and management, I mean, this is just strategically keeping up with the regular upkeep of a property. So when it goes back to the broken windows theory, a window left broken may cause more. So creating a maintenance plan can help preserve your property value and make it a safer place. And then target hardening, this isn't necessarily a principle, but it is used to strengthen the security of a building or like pieces that are installed to protect the space further. Then we also have the second generation. So this is second generation CPTED. And what this is building those connections and communication and social cohesion. So it's seeking to establish those positive relationships between residents and owners and casual visitors, or even neighboring spaces to the property. So this really works in conjunction with the first one. And a lot of the components really fall into the other components. And where we're talking about this is connectivity. So really that is like the difference of trying to face towards other organizations and building those relationships and developing how your community can be inclusive and be fostering more relationships and due diligence and creating that sense of common purpose or space. Another one is going into the idea of community culture. So again, that's building that people would want to call in and create that sense of community and protecting it. See something, say something. And threshold capacity is about the necessary aspects to achieve the balance socially. So if there are areas that are abandoned on your property, maybe it's considering to, again, address those abandoned buildings and repair them. So anyway, now that you know the theory, I mean, this is a long background of that, but really we can go into more of the practical aspects now. So what I'm really talking about is creating sightlines. So allowing the connection of those legitimate users and minimizing the opportunity for concealment. So as you can see in the picture, the sight lines and the dotted lines where you can see through the property to what is happening on the other side. So it's just allowing that clear sight to protect your property. Fencing, so sightlines can be achieved through short fencing. So usually we would say that they're no higher than 1.2 meters or like knee height. So decorative, and this just creates that territoriality. It's the ownership of the space, and it doesn't disconnect from the community. Yet, if you have a larger property, there are areas where maybe you don't have visibility to that space constantly, and a taller fence might be wanted. But those barriers rise, and then it actually reduces some of that visibility. So what we commonly see is on this left side, we see a big wall where you can't see behind it. You can't see what's happening. So if you have a shorter fence with an upper section that's visible, that allows you to actually have that visibility. And this is like more of a practical imagery of what that could look like. So you could go decorative, or you could be a bit more simple, but there's a few different options to how you could do this. You could also consider other landscape features such as elevation changes or Berber's landscaping in order to reduce sound. And that's just another one that you could consider, and it creates less climbing, or at least you can see people coming onto your property. So here's an example of what that could look like. So it's creating that public, semi-public, semi-private, and private space. So it's creating those different levels of what you might be looking at. Landscaping is another one. So trees and bushes and plants, I mean, obviously they're very aesthetically pleasing. However, they can be a form of concealment for offenders. So they're searching for homes to break into. There's this image here where we can't see fully into that back property. So we can't tell what is happening there. So regarding this landscaping, we don't want everyone to cut down the trees or the shrubs, but there are some strategic things to consider. So having your shrubs trimmed to knee height and no higher than 3 to 4 feet allows that visibility depending on where they're placed. Trees, again, you want to limb them up. So what that means is removing the branches for 2 feet up to 6 feet. You could go even higher if there is climbing opportunities to go onto your property. And then there's also maintaining your lawn. So I mean, lawns cut, weeds removed. And this is an example of creating those sight lines again. We go back to that original image of creating sight lines, being able to be visible and seeing what's happening on people's property. This is another one that we see commonly. We actually see a lot of people do this, and even on bigger windows. So if you can see where these plants are planted right now, they're blocking a window. So what can happen is they will block others at the same time. And another thing that you can consider is actually installing gravel, and the gravel can act as a way to know if somebody's walking near your window or near a certain area, but you want to make sure that it's small enough that it can't be thrown at your property to create another problem. And then you want to think about light coverage. So are your trees covering lights? Are they blocking paths? Like, does it feel safe to be on your property, or does it not? So considering all of those is really important as you're going through your landscaping and yard maintenance. Lighting is another one. So it's really important, as it can make the criminal more seen and more likely to get caught. So lighting up your entrances, exits, stairwells, all those things are very important. So in this image, only the door is lit up and not the window. So if it was a real property, it would be quite dark and you wouldn't necessarily see what's happening. So one thing that you can do is you can actually add motion detectors on areas where you want to track that movement. So if you don't want the light on all the time, this is one way that's really convenient and you can see what's happening. Light fixtures should also have protective grating or anti-vandalism covers, because they could be broken, and a broken light again allows that shadow to happen, which means a crime could occur. So just even checking for burnt out bulbs as part of maintenance is common. Another one is actually for best visuals, you can use LED white lighting. So that actually is better for your eye adaptation and actually cameras to be able to see. So moving a lot of your lights from less of the yellow lighting to that type of lighting is going to be a better solution for you. And it's quite an easy fix. For the sheds, outdoor structures are a common target and should be treated very similar to a house. So we'll talk a little bit about windows and doors and what that kind of treatment would look like. But one thing that we do see is a lot that are doors that are always closed are the ones that won't get targeted. So ones that are considered unsecure or are unattended are the ones that we tend to find having some crime. So Jazz from our crime reduction unit will be able to talk about that a little bit more. And one of the things that you can consider is actually some of the valuables, like your tools and ladders and that. I mean, making sure it's not seen from the windows, but securing them. So if they're even an outdoor thing, fully securing them to your property with a lock or something that you, this way it'll protect it from being stolen. We've seen full on patio sets stolen. So it's something that you can do to protect your property. And for garages, very similar. So they're a common target, and usually it's because it's left unsecured. So as I said, but there are ways that people do try to break in. So one of them is that they will put a wedge in the front door, and then there will be the coat hanger or something that they'll try to use to reach the emergency release. So trying to block it, there's like different metal plates that you can put to block it, and that will reduce somebody from being able to manually open it. There's other locks too that you can put on the side so that they're not automatically going to be able to be pried up. So that's just a proper one and something to think about. Another one is your garage door remote. You should treat it very like cash. I think Kathleen will talk about this a little bit more, but it can be used to break into your garage if somebody's breaking into your vehicle. So she'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have parkades and underground, so you want to really think about your maintenance and your management practices of this. A lot of the time, crime can happen into these unsecured parkades and even secured ones. So unsecured is even worse because there's no doors, but a secured one, if you can have access control, is much better. It's less likely to be broken into, but there are still opportunities if it's not done properly. So considering your lighting is really important, bright, consistent, evenly distributed, as well as painting your parkade white, properly labeling stalls and signs, and thinking about waiting for the gate. As Kathleen will mention, there are some signs that we can also give you from the community police station or from ICBC. And then just keeping it clear and cared for. Again, those are just targets and things that people will want to look to steal. And it also is a fire hazard. So there's that. Building identification is important. So emergency numbers and where you are for emergency response. A lot of the time we notice that there's no civic address on all sides of the property. So the most important is the front and the rear, but it helps the emergency response, whether it's 911 or with police, fire, or ambulance, to be able to come and respond. And another one for mail theft is actually for intercoms and mailboxes. They shouldn't fully identify the names of the people who are living there, because what people can do is they can actually use that name and be like, oh, well, I'm friends of Candace, and so please let me in. And if they know your full name, potentially that's more of a notification to your neighbor that they might want to let them in. So not having that fully identifiable is usually a better way to do that. And having emergency contact info is really important for multifamily housing, because sometimes if, say, police need to get into the building, they'll buzz everybody, but if there's somebody easily to buzz, that's probably the best way. Exterior doors. So this is going into target hardening and reinforcing them. So reinforcing it is a good protector of a home, but I mean, if you're not using the door lock, then it's not a good protection. So you really got to make sure that you do those things, because the more that you install, and if you don't actually lock it or people are propping the doors open, then it's actually not going to be that helpful. So again, going at the solid wood door or a steel door, going with a minimum 1-inch throw on the door, and having these screws into the hinges is really important. We also have an image here of the throw of what that would look like. So you want to make sure that the hole in the door is actually big enough for the deadbolt throw to go through, or the 1-inch extension on the image here for the labels. And then your strike plates, again, those are very important, having the full screws, because as people break the door, it can pull those screws out. And then looking at full length astragals. So the picture on the right is one that allows less prying. So it kind of blocks that gap between the door and the edge of the plate. And then there's also the strike guards that are on the left there. We also have visibility, so creating more visibility of your peephole and being able to see what's going on outside. There are traditional ones that are very small, and you can add this much larger one that gives you more visibility. So that's just pretty basic ones for doors, but there are the highly secured ones, which are typically latch doors in more of a multifamily, but they can actually be easily broken. So what happens is people put this little piece of paper in there, and then it can prevent or it actually can allow more people to open the door without having to have it unlatch. So checking for that is a very important one, as well as looking at a building policy for no key, no entry. And just it reinforces for people who live in the building or even visitors that, you know, this is the rule. It's not rude. It's okay to not let the door be left open, because having somebody just piggyback in or follow you in is where sometimes crimes can happen because they're unknown to the building. Patio doors and windows. So there are additional locks that you can add. There's quite a few different ones, but this allows there less ability to break in. So if there's multiple locks, usually you have a primary and a secondary. So having 2 locks on the window can be very helpful. Another one is considering lift and slide issues. So for a long time, we were seeing a lot of break and enters into patio doors that were actually lifted with like a wedge or with something that was able to lift it. So putting just a screw even in the top pane can reduce it from being lifted. So that's just a really easy one and won't cost that much money. Security and surveillance. So Jazz will talk about this a little bit more, but we really want to talk about how we talked about natural surveillance. So just having that visibility, which is really good. But if you don't have that, here's some tech options. I mean, one is a dog. So I mean, they bark typically when somebody's around. So having that, but if you're not a dog person, you could consider having an alarm system or a camera system. And in Port Coquitlam, we actually have a pilot registry that hopefully all of our other jurisdictions will consider doing as this pilot launches and goes into place. So you can register your cameras with us, and it actually helps the officers to be able to do investigations when there's an incident or even a missing person. We also have having an inventory of your valuables, so such as your bike and other things, and with serial numbers is really important, as well as lights on, maybe random timers. So I think Jazz will talk about this a little bit more too. So overall, going into maintenance and management is important. So all these things, thinking about graffiti, garbage, recycling, signs of disrepair, clutter, accumulation of mail and newspapers, which Larry might talk about from Canada Post. All of these things are just really important to show that you care about your space. And finally, as part of the newer generation, we have the building connections. So getting to know your neighbors. And honestly, I think this is one of the best crime prevention methods, because then you would know what is not normal for your area. So if you know that, you know, your neighbor John doesn't have kids, and then all of a sudden you see kids breaking in or going into their backyard, you can be like, hey, that's a little bit different. That's not what's normal for this area. So knowing your neighbors is really, really important. So going into that, we have Block Watch, where you get to know your neighbors and community, so you can volunteer with it. You could have notice boards, or even like a little library where you share your books, or having different community gatherings. And with COVID, you know, restarting, or I guess us restarting from COVID, we can look at how we can build those new connections a little bit better. So that's kind of what I had on my component, but I think what we'll do is we'll let Jazz now bring up some of his information about the actual detachment and our jurisdiction within Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, Belcarron, and more, and even just the Lower Mainland.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Candace, for letting me be a part of this presentation. Your presentation was amazing. Lots of good information there. Some stuff that we'll build on in this presentation. My name is Constable Binder. I work at the property crime team here in Coquitlam at the detachment, and we will get right into it. The Coquitlam property crime team has been around in Coquitlam for over a decade. We were formerly called the Prolific Target Team. We've had a name change to be called the Property Crime Team. We found that as we were dealing with a lot of prolific targets, they did tend to veer towards property crime, and that was essentially became more of our mandate, and we focused in on that. It does, our property crime does tend to happen here in Coquitlam and in other jurisdictions, but it also leads to other kinds of investigations. It's not always just property crime. A break and enter can lead to firearms offenses. It can lead to fraudulent transactions that are carried out throughout the jurisdiction. And of course, it also goes to other jurisdictions. Our offenders or criminals tend not to stay in just one jurisdiction. They will travel from, Maple Ridge to Coquitlam to Burnaby, especially since the Tri-Cities is such a close city to city area. One good example that we have of this is the South American theft group that we've just investigated them recently. It was a very big investigation for us, and we found that not only were they multi-jurisdictional, they were actually Canada-wide, and would do a lot of things like bring people from other parts of the country over here, coach them how to commit break and enters, and then send them back just to hamper our investigation and make it difficult for us to identify suspects. Something that we're going to come up with a lot during this presentation is video surveillance. I know Candace brought it up a little bit, but it is a super helpful tool, and we're going to try to reinforce how helpful it is for us as we go through this presentation. Before we get into any of that, though, we're just going to do the softball stuff, things that most of you have probably heard in the past, but it bears mentioning again. Easy prevention methods. Most of our property crime stuff is usually a crime of opportunity. It's not always, but a lot of the time it is. And what I mean by crime of opportunity is that if you make it easy for someone to commit this crime, they're going to. Criminals generally don't want to get caught. They generally don't want to do too much work. They want to get the biggest payoff for the least amount of consequence. One of the stories that I can mention regarding that is Mr. F. We won't mention his full name here, but he is a real person, and it's somebody that we've dealt with on several occasions, and he has what he believes to be his code. He will not break into any property. He will not cause any damage. But if you allow him to get into your vehicle by leaving your door open or leaving your windows down or leaving your garage unsecured, he believes it's his right to get into that vehicle, that garage, that home, and take your belongings. So don't make it easy for them. Don't leave things in sight. Absolutely not. Lock your doors. Make sure that if you go on vacation, you have timers. You have neighbors that are coming by to check on your property. Don't let papers stack up in front of your home. That's a clear indicator that you may not be there, and this is an easy target. And we're all about making sure that we don't make things easy for our criminals here. Visibility is huge, as Candace mentioned. Have lights, have them on timers if you can. Make sure that there are no dark spots outside of your residence. If Mr. Criminal sees that he can walk up your shrub line and he's not going to get caught on any cameras or any lighting, then he's probably more apt to target your home as opposed to your neighbor's home, which might be more well lit and protected by surveillance. Garage door openers are going to come up again today. Definitely do not leave them in sight. Now you're just making sure that if someone does decide to break into your vehicle, they have more motivation to do so, because they will likely be able to enter your garage and then have a bigger payoff with all the property that you store in there. Another thing that we're big on is wallets. You probably have heard it a million times. Don't leave your wallet or any credit cards, debit cards inside your vehicle, because it's a magic plastic card that gives this criminal an opportunity to access all of your funds and have a great time that night before we can investigate and get onto it. Technology has come a long way. We're going to move on to that in the next slide, but video surveillance is a huge help for us as an investigative team. It really helps us narrow down potential targets that we might be doing surveillance on and who might be carrying out crimes in the area. One quick funny story about video surveillance and how far it's come is we recently had a break and enter into an underground parkade. It was an older building, had very professional camera footage. The only problem with that was that it was installed about 10 years prior. So we were looking at very grainy footage on a very small monitor, no high def, nothing. And we knew right away looking at it that we were going to have trouble identifying anybody from that footage. Luckily for us, in that same underground parkade, we had a brand new Tesla. And Teslas have this thing called Sentry Mode, which was activated just by hearing the breaking of the glass at a nearby vehicle. And we got great 4K video, and that really helped us crack the case on that one. Moving on. Big thing for us as an investigative team is cataloging of your property. It really helps us. I would say it almost helps us as much as surveillance footage does. And how you catalog your property is by knowing your serial number. This is huge. And just to give you an example, we come across very expensive property in the hands of people that may not have access to that property or maybe should not have access to that property. And sometimes that property, sometimes bicycles could be involved in suspicious circumstances. And we do run checks regularly on that property, but we find that those numbers are not reported to police because they were never recorded. So if you do not record it and you can't report it, then we can't make sure that it's not stolen and return that property to you. And that's one of our key things in this unit is we really do want to be able to locate and return property back to the community. Photograph your valuables if you can. This really helps us with confirming property that we might find through the course of search warrants. We see thousands of exhibits through the course of our investigations, definitely through the year. And we're not always able to determine what should go back to which owner because we can't confirm that the property actually belongs to you. Keep receipts for your valuable purchases. This not only helps us, but it also helps you with your insurance claims, which you should absolutely do if property can't be returned to you. Just as a side thing, it really helps us show the judge when we're carrying out search warrants that we're looking for specific items when we're executing a search warrant. This helps because there's a high threshold we have to meet in convincing a judge to let us into somebody's home in order to violate their privacy and confirm that they are the offender or they have stolen goods on hand so that we can get those and return them into the community. What to do if you're the victim of a property crime offense? Absolutely call it in. We have a non-emergency line that's up on the page right now. It is absolutely important. Time and time again, when we're on the road, sometimes we hear people say that, yeah, you know, I was a victim of a TFA as well, and TFA meaning theft from auto. But I didn't call it in because, you know, even though John 2 doors down had his debit card stolen, credit card stolen, and his insurance papers missing, all I lost was a few bucks. Well, it's still important for us because it really does help us establish a pattern. Sometimes it helps us with our timeline. Maybe John had his vehicle broken into about an hour prior. You had your vehicle broken into an hour later. Well, now we know that this person was on the street for the duration of an hour at least. We might not even know exactly anything more specific than that, but we can canvass from there. We can knock on doors from that point on. Maybe from your vehicle, 3 houses down, another of your neighbors had great surveillance footage of the street, and we can now figure out a timeline, a direction of travel, clothing, scars, marks, tattoos, anything that can help us narrow down who this person might be. Another thing this does is it really helps us understand how many property crime offenses are happening in a certain area. And if we need to hone in on a certain location in order to establish a target or figure out who might live in that area, this is a huge key factor for us. Online reporting is available. If you do feel like it's not big enough for you to call in, definitely still try to do it online. It's a super easy process. You just type in online reporting for Coquitlam into Google. It'll bring it up right away. And somebody here on this end, our dispatch group, will go through and vet out what calls we should attend and what calls we shouldn't attend. So if you feel like it's not a big enough deal for police to attend, but you report it online, someone here is going to determine, well, we know we have cameras in that area, or maybe you haven't gone through the vehicle, and we can send an investigative team out to determine if there's any fingerprints, and we can go from there. Any sort of investigative avenue that helps for us, somebody will come out to your area. Crime scene management, following on the heels of calling it in. Do your best not to disturb the crime scene. I understand that sometimes it's difficult. Your first inclination when you've had your house broken into is to figure out what happened, what's gone. Try not to. Call it in right away. We'll tell you how quickly we're going to be there. And when we get there, it really does help us if the scene hasn't been disturbed. Why does that help us? Well, a lot of the times, the people that are doing these kinds of crimes are generally people we've dealt with before. And they were likely going to be in the system. We have their fingerprints. And if they have left fingerprints in the area, that is a huge tool for us, as it really helps us narrow down the target that we are going to be dealing with. Also, on the heels of fingerprints, DNA can be left at the scene. Quick story about that. We just recently been investigating a group of people that have been committing break and enters in the area. And we've we had a hard time figuring out who it might be. We did have a blood that was left at the breaking of a window, and it came back, sometime later to point to a specific individual that we were looking at for other crimes, which allowed us to tie in multiple break-and enters and continue that investigation. Statement timeline. We are going to take a statement from you when we get to your home or to your business or to your vehicle. We want to try to determine what time this may have occurred, or when you left your vehicle or home last, who may have come and gone since then, who has access to your vehicle, who has access to your home, if you have any cameras, if you have people that look out for your home for you, or anything that you may know that might help us investigate this further. So if you can take a minute after you've called it in, just to kind of get that straight in your mind, so that it's a clear, concise statement that really helps us come back to it when we need to, and it plays well in court. It just expedites our investigation all that much more. Let us know also at that time if you had any credit cards, debit cards stolen at the time, because that's a huge investigational tool for us as well. We will tell you to contact your bank immediately and try to get statements. We've had it that on the same day as a crime has occurred, somebody has used your credit card or debit card at a 7-Eleven or a Home Depot, and we're able to follow that pattern, get camera footage from those locations, and determine who the offender is. Talk to your neighbors, as Candace said. This is huge. Try to figure out who's supposed to be on the street prior to becoming a victim of a crime, who's not supposed to be on the street, determine who has cameras. And if you have been a victim of a crime, walk around your neighborhood. Sometimes offenders will discard things they don't believe are valuable to them immediately, and they may drop them in a certain area. If you see them, don't pick them up. Just know that that's where it was dropped. Let us know. We'll definitely check that area out as well. That helps us with a few things. We can pick up property that might have fingerprints on it. We can also determine the area maybe that they exited your street from. And lastly, try to create a community Facebook group. Communication is key when you're preventing property crime, and it's definitely a helper when you have been the victim of a property crime and you now need to compare facts. As I mentioned, video surveillance is huge for us. It is a great tool. I can't harp on it enough. It's increased exponentially in the technology that's available out there. I'm not the most tech savvy person, but I can say for sure that it is easy to set up. If you can use your cell phone, if you can use a smart TV, the video surveillance now is tied into applications that are easy to use so that you can monitor your home safely, quickly. There are different types of video surveillance. There's professional monitoring, which comes with subscription services that you'll have to pay for monthly. But there's also the easy to use, install yourself cameras, which is all 4K now, high definition, and it just goes straight to your phone, and it'll send you a notification if somebody's coming to your door, if you have a Ring doorbell or a doorbell that's connected to your security system, or if there's monitoring, active monitoring, motion detected, you will get a notification on your phone. So it really allows you to stay plugged in with your home, and you don't have to go all in right away and make sure that your whole home is wired up. I understand that there's a cost benefit to that, but you can start slow. You can put up one Nest Cam, then you can put up another one, and as you figure out where the weak spots in your home are, you can continue to add cameras that you'll be able to monitor on the go. And definitely what I like to say is try to get cameras that are going to get your whole street. Definitely cover the front of your home first, the place that you might get the most access, and cover your whole street, because it really gives you the idea of who's coming and going, who's leaving, who's not. You want to cover the front door, any windows that are easy to access, and any areas that are dark at night or even during the day. You want to make sure that you're lighting up as well. It does work for us for many different reasons. It helps us identify suspects, vehicles, clothing, even in a world where COVID is a thing and everybody's covered up with masks. Good video surveillance can help us crack a case much faster. It gives us details you wouldn't believe, and I'll tell you a story about that. One of the cases that we were working, we had an inkling that somebody we knew was committing break-and-enters because we had worked her in the past. We'll call her Miss N. And we were aware that she had a mole on her face. Now we were able to get great footage from one of the break-and-enters that happened, and we were able to determine that this person who dressed similarly but may not have been enough to identify her in court, a mole could be seen on the same place on her face, which really helped us further that investigation. And that again came down to just great video footage. It was 4K. You couldn't ask for anything better. Time is of the essence. Know your equipment. Video surveillance now is very easy to use, but some equipment is more professional, and you have DVRs or PVRs in your home that you need to be able to use. Try to figure that stuff out before you're a victim of a crime. If you have a USB, or if you have a certain way of downloading that or transferring that to people that might need it, the police, for example, try to figure out that process before this happens, because what's happened is we've gone to homes before that have been victims of crime, and we've attempted to get footage, but it takes us a long time because players don't work, or the operator doesn't understand how to get that footage off of it. We do our best to help you along with that, but of course we don't understand all of the technologies that are out there as well, and we're really just hoping for some help from the community in understanding the equipment that's in your home. Another reason time is of the essence is bad guys don't like to hold on to stuff, and when we do execute our search warrants after getting our footage from you, sometimes some of the property that was taken from you has been sold or discarded, and we're not always able to get it back. Having good video footage also helps us prevent other offenses. The sooner we know who might be carrying out these crimes, the sooner we're on them for surveillance, and we're able to actually follow them to crime and prevent other offenses from occurring. And again, I've already mentioned time is of the essence because we'd really like to get your things back to you. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll hand it back over to Candace.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Constable Binder. We really appreciate that information. I think a lot of it was very, very valuable for what you were talking about. And one thing I will mention too is for cameras, I mean, you're going to want to think about if you are a strata or somewhere that needs to follow, or a business, if you need to follow the Privacy Commissioner's guidelines as well for your surveillance and cameras. Just double check on their website to make sure that you're in compliance of wherever you're placing those, just for your legalities and that kind of side of things. But otherwise, I mean, as you've seen, cameras can be very, very valuable. But yeah, let's bring it over to Larry Wong from Canada Post. He's got some very valuable information for us about mail theft.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Just a little bit of background on myself. I've been with Canada Post Security Investigation Services for 14 years. Been a postal inspector most of that time. I've just gone into a role in postal security operations. So I'll quickly go over the presentation, and this will support Candace and as well as Jazz's presentation. There we go. So this slide here, I just want to show you the crime trends from Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam. Touch wood for 2021, we haven't had a lot of mail theft attacks in terms of to our community mailboxes, to our apartment mail panels. So we've seen quite a drop from in 21, say compared to 2020 and 2019. A lot of community mailboxes, they were either pried open or the locks were drilled. So we haven't seen a lot of that. And if you notice, we've had a big drop in apartment mail panels from as high as 13 2 years ago to nothing really. Keep in mind, this is the incidents that are reported to Canada Post. So not necessarily, it's really important that if you are, your mailbox has been broken into or your mail's been stolen, please report it to the police in a timely manner, because that will skew the statistics. Want to really enforce the message in terms of security of the mail. So in other words, if you're expecting something in your mailbox, whether it's in your home, pick it up in a timely manner. The delivery agent may come to your house at 11 in the morning, and then you don't clear it till 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. that just leaves more time for an opportunist or someone walking by just to look in your mailbox, and they see something, they would take it. Same thing for community mailboxes. Really, really important. Some people will open letters and just leave them inside their compartment. Remove them once again in a timely manner. So if you're on your way home after work, clear it right away. Don't wait till after dinner or 10, 11 o'clock at night to clear your community mailbox. Another important message, with the COVID going on right now, there's a lot of not just mail, but parcels that are left on your front steps. You've got to make sure that if someone's at home or get someone to pick up your mail, you want to reduce the opportunity for someone walking by to see that Amazon package, to see that parcel and take it. Because traditionally, they wouldn't take it if it's sitting there. So it's important so that you don't want to bait the target into taking your mail. Another thing there's a good question that was raised about preventing fraud, is that when you're discarding your packages or you're discarding your empty packaging, take the label off, take your name off it and shred it, or mail that you don't want. Don't just rip it up and put it in your recycling bag. Take the address off, label off, and shred it. So people won't have access to your name. They don't know who's living there. If you're away on vacation, you can always, there's a whole mail service. You can also have a neighbor or a relative pick up your mail. And this is just a pie chart just to show that, you know, thieves and the bad guys, they're still interested in Canada Post locks, trying to make counterfeit keys. Not as prevalent nowadays, but locks get stolen so that you can have easy access to mailboxes. So as you can see, not a huge crime trend right now for 2021. That could be attributed to the to COVID and more people being indoors. But now that we're at phase 3 here and people are getting vaccinated, there's just more people out and about, so more chance of mail getting stolen. And there's our customer service number that will be at the very end, a slide at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. That's my presentation, Candace. Anything that you wanted to share or add?
No, I think that your presentation was really great, and it is an important topic because of how, as Larry said, it can lead into identity theft from some of just mail theft. So it sounds like it would be pretty basic and it's not that important, but it really, really is. And as much as it's not as much happening, I know that in the past the trend had been pretty high. So it's really good that we had this conversation. So I appreciate your time today, and I think we'll move into Kathleen, who will now be talking about auto crime and her perspective on that.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to pull up my screen here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn about how you can decrease crime in your community. So what I'm going to focus on is preventing auto crime and some of the ways that we can all prevent auto crime. You know, it's a persistent threat. It's existed in British Columbia for many, many years. You know, and the big thing is, you know, as I go through my presentation, you're going to see that over time, the total theft of vehicles have come down dramatically. But what we're seeing still is vehicles getting broken into. So that's what we're really going to focus on in this presentation. So older vehicles are a little bit more of a target. And the reason why is because older vehicles don't tend to have immobilizers. Prior to 2007, vehicles were suggesting that you use like a locking device still, because similar to what you see here, the steering wheel lock, because as of September 2007, all vehicles and vans had to have immobilizers installed in them. So really what we're seeing is a lot of those older vehicles, such as, you know, it would be the older vans, it would be the older Honda Civics that are still getting stolen just because they're still on the road. Obviously, they're very good cars, but they don't have the immobilizers. So we're asking everyone who has an older vehicle to use the steering wheel lock. Again, same theme, just make it harder for thieves. So the issue and the thing that we're not necessarily seeing come down is theft from vehicle, because take a look at this list. Look at all the things that are being left behind in vehicles. Smartphones, like we're talking, my smartphone, my entire life is on this phone. I actually have all my credit cards and everything in this phone. And yet people are leaving these in their vehicles. Unfortunately, laptops, work tools. So this is a list that we have captured from police across the province. And we're seeing people still leaving them in their vehicles. And of course, a thief is watching, and they're going to smash your window, and they're going to try to get these things that are, you know, very valuable. Also, one thing I wanted to point out on this list is cash and change. You know, you might look and you go, ah, that's loony, or whatever. That's like, I mean, how could that be? You know, no. For somebody who might be desperate, they're going to smash your window and get that loony. Garage door openers, we talked a lot about this. So, you know, typically, obviously, you have your insurance papers in your vehicle. Your insurance papers have your address. Take your insurance papers, take your garage door opener. Now they can access your home. And there's many people that do not lock their doors from the garage into the house. So that's another thing that you could do, is making sure that your door from your garage into your house is also locked. So what can you do to make sure that this doesn't happen to you? Treat your keys like cash. So, you know, I think it was Constable Binder who was talking about the fact that, you know, there's somebody out there, and, you know, if you've left things open or you've left your keys in your car, you know, some people think, hey, that's my opportunity. I can access your stuff. Obviously, we know that that's not right, but there's some people that think that way. So make sure that you always keep your keys with you on your person. Park in secure, well-lit areas. Obviously, the number one, remove valuables. Like, even if you're looking at your change, you're like, take that out of your vehicles too. Other things that you can do is particular if you live in multi-family housing, is you can get these signs, which I'll go into, that are free for you to remind the residents to wait for the gate to close behind you. Because what we see is sometimes if you're not, thieves will run in and now they can access your entire garage. Okay, and then use an anti-theft device. And in fact, using an anti-theft device, we do at ICBC provide some incentive. So if you do have an anti-theft device on your vehicle, you do get an insurance break discount. Okay, so this is what the signs look like. I had mentioned, and Candace had mentioned, some of the signs that we have that are available. So if you live in multi-family housing and you're interested in these signs, so you see the one sign we have, don't just drive away, wait for the gate to close behind you. That's obviously where you would have it at the entrance of the building that you live in. And then we can also provide you with a number of these don't just walk away, and reminding all the residents there to remove their valuables from their vehicles. So if you're interested in obtaining some of these signs, I know that at the end, Candace will have a number that you can call. We have some already. You could pick some up at the Maryhill Community Policing Office, but also I can order some for you as well. Something that also ICBC is doing, and we're a big support of a group called Impact, and you may have heard of it. Basically, it's a police-led agency, and they're really focused on decreasing auto crime. One of the biggest programs that has had such a great effect on decreasing theft of and theft from vehicles is something called a bait car. So that's where these vehicles are out in our communities, and they look just like a regular vehicle, but they're not. They have this great equipment, and then great communications to the police who are running the bait cars. And when thieves get in the car, they have about, I don't know, maybe a couple of minutes they can drive it. Meanwhile, they're being filmed the entire time. And then after a couple of minutes, all of a sudden, the vehicle becomes immobilized, will not drive any further. And then, because of the GPS, police know exactly where the vehicle is. So they, of course, rush to the site and they can arrest the people who have stolen it. So if you're interested, on ICBC.com, there is some very almost entertaining coverage of real thieves stealing these vehicles, and they don't know that they're being filmed. And it's the realization that, oh my God, I think we're in a bait car. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So if you have about 5 minutes to watch, I really suggest going on ICBC.com and watching that. So something else that ICBC does in your community is supporting community-based activities. And, you know, these activities are run from and through your awesome people that are actually on the call, Nicole Cairns and Julie, and of course Candace. So they oversee these wonderful volunteer programs. And these pictures just say it all. These volunteers are out at night. They're out sometimes when it's not great weather, but they're volunteering their time to go to locations that are deemed high risk in terms of high risk for auto theft. And they're reminding people to either leave, not to leave anything in their vehicles, or they're going out and they're looking for vehicles that look a bit odd and running them in a system through a stolen auto recovery and seeing if they're stolen. And then they can bring it up, and then of course we can reunite that vehicle with the proper owner. So I cannot say enough about these auto crime programs and the volunteers, and of course the wonderful volunteer coordinators that run it. It's a fantastic program, and we're very, you know, proud to support these groups, and they do make a difference, absolutely. Something that's a little bit new, in particular because, you know, with COVID, it was a little bit harder, obviously, for volunteers to get together and for volunteers to then put something called crime prevention notices on vehicles. So these are these notices that remind people to take everything out of their vehicles. You know, it wasn't really a good time during COVID where somebody would want to go to their vehicle and see something that somebody else touched, obviously. So, you know, the awesome people that work with the cities of Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, these wonderful volunteer coordinators I'm talking about, came up with this great idea. And it was to work with these larger signs. And you can see that the sign here is placed in now a location where it's higher risk. They're seeing some, you know, some auto crime activities. So it's again that way to remind people to take everything out of their vehicles. And it also reminds them to phone that in to the non-emergency, obviously 911 if the crime is happening. But if it's something that they come back to, their window's been smashed, but no one's around, there's that non-emergency number to call that into. So this is a great program, and we're happy to be part of this program as well. So that's the end of my presentation, and I didn't know if there was any questions. If there are, maybe at the end, happy to answer them, but I'm going to hand this over to Candace now.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen. Such a lovely job, and honoring our programs and just the great support that we get from you with all of that. Again, there's a lot of partnership here. Again, we have that with Canada Post. We have that with our community response team. And that's what this is about, is building those connections and everyone working together. So because of time, I mean, we try to fit in a lot of our questions from the community into our presentations. So what we will do is just end it off here by maybe just saying one thing from your presentation that you really think would hone in on personal property crime protection. So why don't we start with Jazz, and we can work our way through the screen, and then we'll end it in a few seconds here.
Thank you, Candace. Yeah, for sure. Right now, we're definitely seeing a trend with vacant homes. So if there's one thing that I could say, keeping your home looking like it's lived in would be a huge benefit to making sure that you prevent break and enters. You don't want papers piling up outside of your house. Just make sure that blinds are open or closed at certain times. Neighbors go by, lights come on at timers. Because what we're seeing is if anybody thinks that your home is not lived in or even looks like it's not lived in, that they will attempt to break into your home. So that
Thank
would be
you.
the one thing for me.
Appreciate it. Good point. How about Larry? Do you have a final word? Oh, you're muted.
I just want to reinforce the message about collecting your mail in a timely manner. The longer your mail sits out, you become a victim or a crime of opportunity. People will take a shipping label, they'll take your contents or an invoice, and they'll create your identification with their picture on it or their name, but they're using your address. So I want to reinforce that message of security with the mail. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And how about Kathleen, your last final point?
Well, I just want to remind folks to take everything out of their vehicles when they leave. Theft from vehicle will always exist as long as people are leaving items in their vehicles. So if we want that to stop, it'll be up to us to take, even if it's some change, take it from your vehicle and leave it empty.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that as well. And yeah, there's a lot of very valuable, small, minor points. And I know everyone has a lot of things to think about in their daily life. And so these are just a few more, but I mean, making that process and that practice. And that's what this is about, is creating those crime prevention best practices that you will do every day in order to protect yourself and your family and the things that you buy. Like, these are your things that are your property. So why not protect it the best that you can? So time flies. I think we're at our time. So thank you everyone for your time today as presenters, and thank you to those who were following and watching along. We will be posting this eventually as well. So there's a lot of resources though. We will put up a small screen here in a second that'll show all of our different resources that are available. And this will allow you to explore more information. We will be sending an email to all those participants who signed up today, who will get these resources onto through an email, as well as a feedback form. So giving us feedback on these presentations is really, really helpful, helps us to move forward and bring you new topics or new things to talk about. We look forward to hearing that feedback from you. Don't forget to follow our RCMP Coquitlam social media. There's a lot of details on how to sign up for our next webinar. We have a really, really exciting one that Nicole Cairns is hosting this time. That's about all of our different special units within the RCMP. So I really, really hope you guys tune into that one. And just thank you again to everyone for your time today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Candace. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.